Good day everyone, I am Irene Jane L. Cagadas and I will be the first reporter of Group 2. So my topic is all about the reinforcement. So reinforcement comes from behaviorism, a branch of psychology that studies how animals and human beings respond to different reinforcers from their environment. So the pioneering work was done by B.F. Skinner, who developed the theory of operant conditioning. So first, let's discuss about operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, this is a method of learning that occurs through a reward and a punishment for a certain behavior. So for reinforcement, this is the process of reinforcing or strengthening to increase a desired behavior. So it is all about how one acts in response to a certain situation. So there is a stimulus kung saan niya pagbuhat in a certain task. For example, suguon ka. Kung saan mo na siya pag-act. If there is a reward or if there is a punishment. So there are two types of reinforcement, the positive reinforcement and the negative reinforcement, which will be discussed by the next reporter.
The next topic is all about positive reinforcement. It is a reward for performing the behavior correctly. It should come soon after the behavior is performed. It is usually in the form of a quick vocal praise like nice pass, a clap, or a supportive gesture like head nod or fist bump. So this positive reinforcement is any action, a stimulus, a reward that which increases the probability of the behavior or the action reoccurring. So mo ni sila ang ato ang mo ni ang ato ang ginahatag or ginapakita sa ato ang athlete or ato ang student if nagpakita sila og good behavior. And also, if you are going to give him or her a reward, it should come soon after the behavior is performed. For example, kanang sa ato ang athlete na pag she have a or nagapakita siya og good posture and kanang good form, and also ang uh, nag nag-show po siya or iha yung i-perform ang proper handling sa racket anana, and also pagtira niya kay nasulod man or na-in. So with that, ato da yung ipakita ang ato ang positive reinforcement or ang ato ang reward, like saying, hey, your form looks great and you are doing much better na yun, or any form or any way of that shows a positive reinforcement kay ang satisfier or ang ato ang athlete or ang atong student kay ma-encourage jud siya to reoccur it or iha na pud tong i-perform og balik. And kay with this, it helps develop mastery in skill and mastery in performance. And we must know that not all reinforcements are going to have the same effect on everyone. We really need to know our athletes and what is most beneficial for them, like social, kanang vocal praise, kanang supportive gesture, praise, smile, pat on the back, and also an activity kanang mo niyo sa hayang ato ang makita or ma-encounter always, like ask the athlete to teach a class for skill, kanang pareha maingon natong coach nga kanang o ikaw tudlo sa ilaha kay kanang imo man tong nakuha gaina or permi naman imo makuha niya na. Or also, use your athlete's form as a good example, like what tayo mag-discuss or kanang mupakita na pag kaglaing ana. So, pwede ka maingon or always yun nato ni may counter nga kanang pareha sa gibuhat ni kuan, nga tuon siya, nga tuon pag-perform, nga tuon pagpakita sa good form, nga ana. Nice tong ipakita ni kuan, nga ana. And also, special outings, like take your athlete somewhere else special to work out, or bring in a special guest coach or athlete to work out.
Good day, let's continue. Negative reinforcement. It follows a correct performance, but involves removing something undesirable to reinforce the desired behavior. So take note, negative reinforcement is just like removing or taking something away. So for example, suppose a young boy named Max disliked eating vegetables. So, di siya ganahan mo ka vegetable. Si Max, di ganahan mo ka vegetable. Every time, every time his parents bring a plate of vegetable forward, Max screams out in English. So, sakit-sakit siya, magbabulbol si Max. Kay, hindi siya ganahan sa giserve na vegetable. So, but because his parents can tolerate this screaming, they resort giving Max something else to eat. So, dili man gusto ang parents nga magsakit-sakit yung kuan. So, nag-offer og lain food, then gikuha nila tong vegetables. So, another example. Kevin has noticed that his dog becomes frantic when his neighbor played loud music. So, si Kevin daw naka-notice nga ang iyang iro makuan sa dog na kanang magratol ba frantic, something like ano ba magkasalimuang ning iro basta na mapatugtog og kusog kayo ang iyang silingan. So, ensure that his pet stay calm and it's not discomforted, Kevin has requested his neighbors not to blast loud music from their homes. So, giadto niya yung silingan ug nanghangyo nga pwede pahinayan ang tugtog. So, I think everyone have an idea what is negative reinforcement is all about. Once again, negative reinforcement is just like removing or taking something away. That would be all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Marian J. Asdao, and today let's discuss punishment. Punishment happens in response to an incorrect or undesirable behavior and involves the presentation of something unpleasant. So, punishment simply means the consequences of the incorrect or undesirable na mga behavior. Like for example, na late ang isa ka athlete sa practice. So, expected jud nga na siya consequences or punishment, just like the player must run pila ka laps or depende na sa coach or do push-up. So punishment is usually psychological, like ridicule or embarrassment, and it often trends toward abuse. So dili tanan punishment is good, any punishment that is can shame and embarrass the person or the child or the athlete, if you punish the child in not effective way, so it can cause psychological damage or even psychological abuse. So negative reinforcement is not the same as punishment, because negative reinforcement it involves removing something that can increases the behavior. For example, in an athlete or in a team, they have productive na practice, they will do in their practice. So their coach will remove some difficult drills or dili na ba sila magdaga at the end sa ilahang session. Well, sa punishment, the more na magpabanlog ka, the more na they added and faces the consequences or the punishment that can decreases the behavior because they learn the lesson naman ay dili na day ko magpalit late kay para dili day ko mapanisyan. So punishment is usually wielded in an unpredictable and irritational manner when the coach loses control of a situation. So kini punishment is mahatag jud especially and every time nga mag-practice or perminti na lang malate ang mga athletes, tamad mag-practice ang mga athletes, of course, as a coach, ma-irritate jud ta. And ma-irritate jud ta sa ilang mga behavior. That's why we give punishment, consequences, and even we implement more rules and restrictions so that lang jud nga they've learned their lesson and knows what not to do. And this punishment lang naman is for them to help them for themselves, for an athlete to do more appropriately about their practice and even magamit ni nila sa ilahang future. So that's all for punishment. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am Marcus J. Jadalfin. Today I am going to discuss about reinforcement. This is just an additional information, and by this you can also recall what are the topics that you have discussed from the first reporter. in general of reinforcement, it is a process in which our behavior strengthened by the immediate consequence. We also add reinforcement to improve strength. So I know that all of you can remember what reinforcement all about. Another explanation about reinforcement, it is also increases the frequency of our behavior by providing something rewarding and pleasurable. If the goal is to increase the frequency of that behavior, the coach should provide reinforcement. It can be positive or negative. And punishment can also be positive and negative, right? So now, let's also recall about the 4 types of reinforcement. So I hope that everyone can remember about the types of reinforcement. So let me discuss or give another information about this. So the 4 types of reinforcement are positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and the extinction. So what is positive reinforcement? It is a reward performing the behavior correctly. It is also about good behaviors. Example of that is being patient enough for the athlete to perform the ideal behavior, then immediately rewarding her. Do you think that positive reinforcement can be effective for the performance of the athletes? So yes, because it creates a better learning and skills development situations for athletes. It also helps lower athlete anxiety and increase their confidence and makes athlete more likely to return for the next season. So let's proceed to the next one, which is the negative reinforcement. From the word negative, it can occur when something unpleasant or uncomfortable is removed or taken away in order to increase the likelihood of the desired behavior. So the third one is punishment. This coaching reinforcement style focuses attention on what the athlete is doing correctly. It usually wielded in unpredictable and irrational manner when the coach loses the control of that certain situation. Last is extinction. It refers to the gradual weakening of a conditioned response that results in the behavior decreasing or disappearing. In other words, the conditioned behavior eventually stops. And that's all for today, and I hope that you learned about the topic and also about my additional information. Thank you for listening.
So now let us move on to the 5 principles of using reinforcement as a coach. So the first principle is we have planning. So it clearly identifies the behaviors you want to reinforce before practice starts. Sit down and map out the types of behavior you want to see from your players. It might be high levels of effort during practice. So as a coach, you need to plan everything first before you start the training. So for example, sa mo ang coach na mo sa softball, so nagaandam siya training plan sa mo dili lang siya mo na siya ang every year nga plan, but every week gina siya ga prepare og training plan para sa mo kung gusto niya ipa-high ang mo ang cardiovascular endurance, sa mo ang cardiovascular strength. So lahi-lahion na niya, dili niya iisa lang kay lahi-lahi man mi og kusog. Next is in coaching players in late adolescence. You might want to get some of your team leaders involved in this process. So this can be a good way to involve them in the process of leadership. Planning has the effect of focusing our attention. So yes, tinuod pod ni siya in the sense that kung example pod sa mo ang captain ball sa mo ang team is namjay time nga si coach dili siya ka sipot sa kaninga training kay naa siya mas importante pa nga buhaton ana nga day. So of course ang iyang bilinan sa kanang mo ang drills og sa as a leader is ang amo ang team captain, and iya po ng time para makita niya kung unsa pa pulos sa usa ka captain ball, no. So ing ana and we all know that planning is the most useful in the learning process, both in the policy update and providing a more useful data distribution in the team. So that's all. Thank you.
So good day, ma'am. I'm Tricia Claire April Duran, and I will continue to discuss the principle of using reinforcement as coach. So principle 2, contingency. Give positive reinforcement when the behavior is done well. In response to a mistake, provide encouragement or instruction. So when a behavior must occur before the reinforcer will be presented, we say that the reinforcer is contingent upon that behavior. So I think this is the most challenging principle of reinforcement. You have to know what good looks like. You have to recognize that good for one athlete may not be good for another athlete. So as every athlete comes with a different level of skill, you have to recognize that there is not one correct way to perform a skill, but often there are many correct ways to solve a problem. So, for example, during a practice, a basketball player makes a good play and receives immediate verbal praise from the coach. So, if you say, well done, when the athlete has not performed skill very well, it's false praise. So, the odds are that the athlete will know it's false praise. So, it's tough being honest sometimes, but if you have build a supportive but challenging climate and you support your players striving to improve, then you're in a good position to give honest feedback. So you have some options when an athlete makes a mistake or doesn't perform ideally. You can provide encouragement to keep trying. You could encourage them to try a different solution to the problem. So try asking them instead, like, that doesn't seem to be working. How could you change it up? So you can also provide technical instruction. Of course, you want to keep this instruction relatively short and simple. So not a full scale diagnose of everything they are doing wrong. So that would be too much feedback for the player to use. So that's all po.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Brian James F. Enriquez, and now I will continue the 5 principle of using reinforcement as a coach. The principle 3, parsimony. So parsimony, keep praise objective, simple and short. Simple praise like got it and bingo can really go a long way. Non-verbal are also great. A simple clap after a successful skill performance says just what you need to say. So in parsimony is a kind of using simple praise to appreciate the good doings of the player. This is very helpful to build up the confidence and motivation of the player by simply praising them. This is very essential also when your player is in training because it will motivate them well, and by the motivation it will drive to develop their skills and performance for them to become more active and competitive in sports.
Good afternoon. I am Hanijin Espinorio and I will be discussing the 4th principle of using reinforcement as a coach. Principle 4, necessity. Determine if any feedback from the coach is necessary or if feedback could come from the task itself. If an athlete is performing a task well, getting better, being challenged by a drill and maintaining focus and interest, is your feedback really necessary? First of all, when we talk about reinforcement, as discussed, diba, in field of sports, it is when an athlete performs a behavior and the coach chooses how to respond to that behavior. If the goal is to increase the frequency of that behavior, the coach should provide reinforcement. And reinforcement can be in a negative or positive form. No? If the goal is to decrease naman the behavior, the response should be punishment. And isa sa principles in using reinforcement as a coach is necessity. In other term pa, it means needed ba siya, kailangan or applicable ba siya nga strategy? As a coach, is our feedback really necessary? Do we really need to open our mouth when things are going well? The answer is yes. However, not all the time. Since great drills, activities, and games nga atong pwede mahatag sa atong mga athletes often don't need reinforcement from a coach because they already provide natural and sensory feedback to the players. So what is this sensory feedback? So this is what our brain and our body can perceive. So a coach instruction and reinforcement can help, but probably the most important thing jud nga mabuhat nato as a coach is to select and plan activities, drills, and games that can provide great sensory feedback to the athlete performing the skill. To further understand the concept, one of the example that I can give is in badminton sports, no? So the situation is that the athletes will learn and train the skill, which is how to properly receive smashes from the opponent. And in receiving smash, jud, the important and appropriate thing na dapat buhaton sa player, no, is to be, of course, alert. Dapat sila nakabend ang ilahang knees and naka-prepare and position ilang racket sa side with proper na gripping, because there is a tendency nga ma-body shot ang player pag dili niya ma-perform in receiving the shuttle. So now, the athlete na nagatrain kay wala man siya or wala niya nabuhat, no? So na body shot siya. And based sa akong experience, sakit jud nilabaw na pag sa chest or sa naong nimo siya nga maigo, no? Masense jud nimo ang kasakit. So this is what we call sensory feedback, no? Because of what we feel pag igo sa shuttle sa atong lawas na ma-realize nila ang ilahang mali ang ilahang position sa pag-receive sa shuttle. In this sense, the feedback or criticism from the coach is not necessary since ang athlete mismo ang nakarealize sa ilahang kakulangan, and that is because of sensory feedback. No, it is also like the coach letting their athletes to be independent in terms of realizing their mistakes and weaknesses. So augmented feedback is often not as effective as sensory feedback, especially for younger na mga athletes, no? Ang ato ang mga verbal feedback sa ilang performance is probably too difficult for an 11-year-old, no, to turn those feedback or criticism into a meaningful skill correction. So this is what this principle talks about, no? Reinforcement, including giving feedback sa ato ang mga athletes, are undeniably helpful jud sila. However, it is also important to consider in applying this strategy in appropriate na mga situation. And not all the time nga we should give our feedback or criticism sa ato ang mga athletes, because there should be time that we should help and let them realize their own mistakes, their weaknesses, their lackness in certain skills for them to grow stronger as athlete and be completely prepared for competitions. That would be all from my report. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kuni M. Gabini. So my topic is Principle 5, the distribution. Reinforcement should be distributed throughout the session and equitably among players. This type of coaching offers learner the opportunity to apply their learning while being guided by a coach who helps them tackle their toughest challenges heads-on. Many coaches also provide an abundance of corrections and instruction to their most skilled players because those players can use it and respond well. So reinforcement distribution coaching brings learning to life through regularly scheduled coaching sessions that focus on implementing new concepts and ideas. So, but over time, it might be problematic or push that athlete to far towards perfectionism. So, the reinforcements will be most effective if administered immediately after the desired behavior has occurred. So, those athletes need simple encouragement and positive reinforcements as well, that constant critique. And then also the challenge is to provide a range of reinforcement across all players. So I found that many of our coaching students struggle with distribution of their feedbacks. So that makes a great to our checklist activity. The more time that elapses after the behavior occurs, the less effective and reinforcement will be.
These five principles of reinforcement as coach, we have the principle 1, planning, principle 2, contingency, principle 3, parsimony, principle 4, necessity, and principle 5, distribution. So these are essential, especially on coach, to be aware on how crucial reinforcements for athletes. However, it goes beyond just being upbeat or expressing gratitude for a job well done. So the effectiveness of reinforcement is based on these five principles. These five principles of reinforcement is the best to athletes in making development on how they improve their performance, and it is the only way to satisfy them. So, implementing the right reinforcement strategy will increase effectiveness and produce better results because learning is a continual process. So, this kind of coaching gives athletes the chance to put what they have learned into practice while being directed by a coach who helps them to face their most difficulties head on. So, reinforcement coaching brings learning to life. The purpose of the principles of reinforcement as coach is to provide additional strength for concrete where it is needed. Athletes learn and develop their skills in better coaching. It also reduces athlete anxiety, boosts their confidence. Additionally, coaches who properly use these five principles of reinforcement have better athlete satisfaction ratings than coaches who do not. So, these five principles as coach can give athletes to build their self-esteem, validate understanding, and generate options, inspire action, and recognize results.